Hello guys, welcome. So today is perhaps one of the most challenging questions in philosophy. Does God exist? Sorry, I sound a bit sick. But yes, this is probably one of the most challenging philosophical questions that philosophers have been debating and battling for centuries. Though, what does it mean when we say God exists? It means that when we say that God exists, we're saying that God exists ontologically, meaning he has a fundamental existence that isn't just like an idea or concept, but that he's actually in reality and his existence is mind independent and fundamental, right? And so there's two positions, theism, but mostly in this series we'll be focusing on classical theism or monotheistic philosophy. So theism is the belief in the existence of one or more divinities or deities, gods, which are both immanent. They exist within the universe and yet transcend, they surpass or are independent of physical existence. These gods also, in some way, interact with the universe, unlike in theism, and are often considered to be omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. So I just got these definitions off a website. The website's called, I think it was called Philosophy's Basics or Philosophy Basics. You could just search it up. It's a really good website. Gives you really good, basic definitions and introductories. And so atheism or non-theism is the belief that gods do not exist or a complete rejection of theism. Also note that when people say they're atheists, I don't know, it's just some people say that they don't make the dogmatic claim that God does not exist. But honestly, I feel like those people lean towards more agnosticism. But if you were to make a claim like God does not exist, that is still a metaphysical claim that requires epistemic justification. Also, on that note, we need to get into more epistemology. I don't know why I'm slacking off. I'm sorry, but that's because of school. I just don't really have that much time. I gotta study, but I'll try my best to get, more into these vids. Okay, and so it is the complete rejection of theism or any belief in a personal God or gods, the latter also known as anti-theism. It can cover a range of both religious and non-religious attitudes. Many atheists tend towards secular philosophies such as humanism and naturalism. So like if you're an atheist, mostly like 95% of the time, you're like a materialist, an empiricist, a nominalist, right? 5% of that is probably like you're a Platonist, but I mean, I haven't seen much of that. I've only seen a few, so. But anyways, this series will cover arguments for God, Thomistic metaphysics, so like principles in Thomistic metaphysics. Like we'll be covering a bit of on essence and being. I'll read that. I'll put that into my reading series later. But mostly we'll cover principles like the principle of finality, right? And just basic, we'll get into his five ways, actus purus, the filioque, right? And then we'll talk about the properties of God, and then some questions about God and answering them. So, if you guys want to do some research first, you can just go up and look up Aquinas Metaphysics or Divine Simplicity. You can find out that, like basic doctrines that are really crucial to his metaphysics, right? That God is simple and God has no parts. Why? Because just as Aristotle said in the Metaphysics, that if God has parts, well, Aristotle's God is kind of impersonal, and Aristotle kind of just contradicts himself. He's like, oh, there's 47 unmoved movers, prime movers, or 55. And this man thinks that the amount of prime movers matches up to the celestial spheres, if I remember. But then again, Aristotle says that their parts implies potential, but God has no potential. God is pure actuality, right? That's actus purus right there for you. Okay, arguments for God in this series will include tag, transcendental argument for God's existence. Mostly, I'll be using the orthodox conception of the transcendental argument from patristic faith, but so really, tag is really just like complex because it's not really just like a generic version of tag. The one I'll be using is more targeted towards the possibility of knowledge that you'll probably see in Jay Dyer. Like, oh, tag isn't just an argument for the existence of God, but rather it's the argument, or it's an argument for the precondition for the possibility of, knowledge, metaphysics, ethics, how these things are possible, right? And then we'll get into like when we when we ever engage in rational debate, we are presupposing metaphysical transcendental categories like, the self, the identity over time, right? And you're presupposing all these metaphysical categories like, how do you know language has meaning? And we'll basically get into that. Also note, tag in the orthodox position is a holistic epistemology. It's not a brute neutrality epistemology like how the scholastics are, but we'll also get into foundationalism, versus coherentism and epistemological holism. Note that coherentism is not the position of J. Dyer. Because coherentism itself, you can make a lot of objections like, well, coherence itself presupposes a logical connection, and then, Bertrand Russell's critique is devastating, right? Because you can't really justify logic under coherentism without going viciously circular, right? And then we'll get into teleological arguments, which just argues from, a final cause or end or purpose. Ontological arguments that establish God's existence as a priori, Descartes and Anselm's, for example. Copin's metaphysical argument, Fazer's five ways to prove God. I need to get that book and read it, but I need that on my reading series. So even though it's like insanely expensive, and the Kalam cosmological arguments, like William Lane Craig's, and then just cosmological arguments in general. Other than that, we will cover every argument I can dig up, right? If I see some, I'll probably put it in. Even if it's random, like, Spinoza's argument, but this man's a pantheist, right? But please let me know if you want me to cover a specific argument, right? Because I would love to learn, We got to be in pursuit of truth. So that's it. Thanks, guys.